Welcome everyone to our channel. Thank you for joining us as we explore the thrilling conclusion to They Exiled Him to Die. He came back with a monster as his pet. In the final moments, Commander Draefis Thorn and his powerful ally, Surix, engage in a nail-biting conflict against the Empire's warships, turning the tables on those who once cast him aside. Trust us, this is one high-stakes confrontation you won't want to miss. Make sure to catch the entire story to see how their daring escape and ultimate showdown unfold. While you're here, please subscribe to our channel so you never miss out on more epic tales of bravery, revenge, and unforeseen alliances. Feel free to drop a comment below to share your personal takes on the story and let us know where you love tuning in. We value your thoughts and can't wait to hear your opinions. Commander Draefis Thorn stood on the threshold of the drop shuttle's open ramp, the relentless shriek of wind drowning out the last remnants of his hope. His wrists were bound with scuffed metal cuffs that bit into his skin, and bruises stained his face like unwelcome badges. The acrid scent of burning fuel mingled with the ozone-laden air, a grim reminder of the planet's violent storms. Below him stretched the nightmarish landscape of Exor-9, an uncharted jungle world where vicious creatures prowled beneath a maze of twisted trees. No human had lasted more than a few hours on this forsaken rock, and now the Imperial High Command intended him to share that fate. Admiral Tezora Vance, her uniform crisp despite the swirling heat of scorched metal, regarded him with a frigid gaze. She had orchestrated his sham trial for alleged treason. Beside her stood Major Torin Kiros, a sneer on his lips as he surveyed Draefis's injuries. In their eyes, he was an inconvenience, an officer too stubborn to obey an order that would have slaughtered innocent civilians. For that, he was being exiled to this deadly wilderness. "Consider yourself lucky, Thorn," the Admiral declared, her tone as cutting as a blade. "We could have executed you outright. Instead, you can test your luck with Exor-9's predators." His ribs ached as he took in a breath, but Draefis raised his chin defiantly. He recalled every twisted detail of the tribunal, how the so-called evidence materialized out of nowhere, painting him as a saboteur. The sentencing had been swift and merciless. Now, with rolling thunder overhead and the engine's roar behind, he stood at the edge of oblivion. Major Kairos spat at his feet. "You had a sterling career, Thorn, but your conscience got in the way. Perhaps these jungle beasts will appreciate your moral code more than the Empire did." Draefis struggled to hide the fury building inside his chest like a roiling storm. He had once respected these officers, served alongside them. That was the cruelest blow of all, knowing how easily honor was discarded for ambition. One last time, he held Admiral Vance's gaze. If guilt gnawed at her, she hid it behind steel. "Drop him," she ordered. A guard thrust a boot against Draefis's back, and he toppled off the ramp. The roar of engines swallowed his startled shout. Gravity seized him, hurling him into the swirling maelstrom of lightning and wind. Rain slashed at him like sharp needles, and the gale's howl drowned out any coherent thought. He crashed through the dense canopy, smashing into unyielding branches. Pain flared white-hot through every limb before the ground finally halted his fall in a punishing collision. For a moment, he lay dazed in the mud, consciousness flickering like a weakening flame. He tasted blood on his lips, felt rain pelt his face, and heard the rumble of distant thunder. They had thrown him away, intending him to die nameless in this hell, but as he fought to remain awake, a single thought crystallized. They might have exiled him, but he was not yet defeated. If the Empire believed it had seen the last of Commander Draefis Thorn, it would soon learn otherwise. Pain clung to Draefis's every muscle as he forced himself upright, the taste of blood thick on his tongue. The jungle around him was a living nightmare. Colossal trees webbed with vines, their leaves wide and waxy beneath the dripping canopy. The sound of falling rain seemed to echo forever, layered with eerie screeches and low feral growls that emerged from the darkness. He blinked away rivulets of water and tried to assess his injuries. Though his body was battered, none of his bones felt irreparably broken. The storm's rough landing had, by some miracle, loosened the cuffs on his wrists, granting him the only gift he possessed: freedom. His shredded uniform clung to him like a second skin, torn in places to expose raw scrapes and bruises. He stood with difficulty, leaning against the trunk of an enormous, gnarled tree. Each labored breath reminded him that the air here was barely breathable, heavy with moisture and strange spores that tickled his lungs in a most unpleasant way. Lightning flared across the turbulent sky, revealing glimpses of the terrain, twisting roots that snaked across the ground, large clusters of luminous fungi glowing with an otherworldly pallor, and the glint of unknown eyes peering from the undergrowth. Every flash of light offered a momentary portrait of a nightmare. Somewhere in the swirling darkness, the planet's apex predators lay in wait. His senses screamed at him to stay alert. Although unarmed, Draefis spotted a jagged length of debris from the drop shuttle embedded in the mud. With numb fingers, he pried it free. Hardly an ideal weapon, but better than nothing. A few tense seconds passed, then he picked a direction, guided by the faint sense of higher ground. If he was to stand any chance of surviving, he needed to find shelter from the relentless storms and the beasts rumored to lurk in this uncharted jungle. Nightfall, if one could even call it that in the perpetual gloom, loomed. As he trudged through the thick undergrowth, he became acutely aware that something was observing him. The feeling prickled along his spine, heightening his caution. After all, XOR-9 was known to devour even the sturdiest reconnaissance drones. That no official records existed of a successful return from this place was a testament to its lethal ecosystem. A snarl echoed through the trees, setting Draefis's teeth on edge. He froze, muscles coiled. The darkness around him felt more alive than the ground beneath his boots. Within seconds, another guttural hiss echoed from the canopy above. It occurred to him that he might already be surrounded, perhaps by half-seen silhouettes poised to strike. Steeling himself, he pressed on, mindful of each step. The mud sucked at his boots, and twisted roots threatened to trip him with every pace. Branches hung low, slithering with vines that dripped greenish sap. He jumped at the snap of something behind him, pivoting in time to see a fleeting shadow vanish between the giant fronds. He clenched his makeshift blade until his knuckles burned white. They had expected him to die in a matter of hours, devoured by some monstrous predator or swallowed by the planet's fury. But he refused to yield. He was still Commander Draefis Thorn, forged in the fires of countless battles. Beneath the pounding rain and the roar of far-off thunder, he whispered a quiet oath to himself. He would survive, and he would make the Empire regret underestimating him. Hours slipped by like a feverish dream, measured in the ragged breaths Draefis took and the countless close calls he narrowly avoided. He skirted sinkholes filled with quivering sludge and evaded plant-like predators that lashed out with barbed tendrils. Each brush with death only heightened his determination. He found a shallow ravine where the canopy was less dense, offering a sliver of starlight between the glowering clouds. The reprieve from the claustrophobic darkness did little to quell his uneasy sense of being watched. At first, he dismissed the crimson gleam flickering in the distance as a trick of his exhausted mind. But every time lightning streaked across the sky, he spotted it again. Two glowing pinpoints suspended at the edge of vision, like coals in a pitch-black hearth. They were too high off the ground to belong to any small creature. Whatever followed him was large, perhaps larger than any terrestrial life form he had encountered. A rumble of thunder made the ground tremble. Draefis slid down the muddy slope of the ravine and pressed his back against a moss-laden boulder. Could it be an ordinary predator or something more cunning? In truth, XOR-9 had hardly been cataloged by the Empire. Officially, the planet was labeled high-risk extreme lethality, which meant little more than stay away. He gripped his scrap metal blade tighter. Had this monstrous shape been trailing him since his crash? Suddenly, a low, guttural growl reverberated through the ravine, sending a jolt of adrenaline through him. He caught a glimpse of the creature as lightning illuminated the scene. A towering silhouette, clad in an armor-like carapace that glistened with the rain. It stood at least 12 feet tall, perched on powerful hind legs and balanced by a thick, segmented tail. Spines bristled along its back. Its elongated forelimbs ended in lethal claws, each dripping with a dark substance that sizzled when raindrops touched it. And those eyes, burning rubies fixed on him with unsettling intelligence. Draefis's heart pounded. He forced himself to breathe evenly, drawing on every ounce of military discipline to remain calm. Charging blindly would be suicide. Running would be just as futile. The creature had the advantage of speed and unparalleled knowledge of the terrain. The only choice was to stand his ground. Thunder shook the sky again as the beast took a cautious step forward, water rolling off its obsidian scales. Its eyes narrowed as if evaluating this strange human who dared not flee. Draefis felt a bead of sweat trace its way down his temple, mingling with the rain. He expected it to lunge, to unleash the savage fury of a true apex predator, but instead it circled him, silent and watchful. A moment of clarity struck him. This was no mindless killing machine. It possessed cunning, perhaps even curiosity. But curiosity did not mean benevolence. Hard hammering, Draefis braced for the inevitable attack. The storm overhead raged, every thunderclap a countdown to violence. The creature let out another resonant growl, claws scraped stone, leaving deep gouges. An undercurrent of challenge hung in the air, as though it were testing him. Summoning the last of his courage, Draefis swallowed hard and raised his pathetic weapon. "If you want to fight," he muttered, voice shaking only slightly, "I won't die easy." Rain hammered the ravine floor, turning the mud into a slick quagmire underfoot. Draefis's breath came in tight, controlled bursts as he locked eyes with the towering creature. Time slowed to a heartbeat's pulse. He knew that if it decided to strike, his odds of survival were slim, yet he refused to cower. He had survived the Empire's betrayal, the brutal crash, and the nightmares of this jungle. He would face whatever X-9 threw at him with defiance. Without warning, the creature roared, a piercing primal bellow that vibrated in Draefis' skull. It lunged in a blur of speed, claws scything toward him. He twisted aside, barely escaping disembowelment. Despite his successful dodge, the force of its swipe blasted him off his feet. He tumbled across the mud, struggling to keep hold of his makeshift blade. The sting in his shoulder told him he hadn't been fast enough. Something hot trickled beneath the tattered remains of his uniform. In a heartbeat, the beast was upon him again. Draefis threw himself backward, slashing upward with a shard of metal. The improvised weapon collided with its chitinous armor, producing a jarring spark, but inflicted little more than a superficial scratch. A furious hiss escaped its maw. Its mandibles clicked, dripping with that ominous fluid. Another strike came, but this time Draefis ducked beneath the raking claws, pivoting around the beast's flank. He aimed a desperate thrust at the gap between its armored plates. The tip of the blade grazed flesh, drawing a thin line of steaming blood that spattered across the wet ground. The creature jolted, more startled than wounded. It reared back, an ear-splitting shriek echoing through the ravine. Draefis braced himself, expecting an immediate counterattack. But the monster paused, red eyes narrowed. As lightning flickered overhead, he saw something in those eyes, a spark of recognition, almost akin to respect. A savage standoff ensued. Both combatants circled each other, drenched by relentless sheets of rain and the roar of distant thunder. Then, in a move that defied explanation, the creature lowered its massive head. Its spines flattened slightly, posture shifting from aggression to a guarded acceptance. Draefis' pulse thundered in his ears. Was it submitting or merely toying with him? Unsure whether it was a trap, he kept his blade raised, but each passing second brought no fresh assault. Instead, the beast let out a low rumble that resonated through the ground. Draefis dared to edge a step closer, heart pounding. He extended a trembling hand, though he fully expected to lose an arm in the process. An invisible pressure, like a prickling at the back of his mind, made him pause. Could it be attempting some form of communication? His hand touched the glistening scales of its forearm. A shiver coursed through him, as if static electricity danced between them. He felt his racing heartbeat mirrored by the creature's powerful thrumming. Despite the primal terror that still clenched his gut, a strange sense of awe flooded him. This nightmare of X-9 was allowing him near, allowing him to live. Breathing hard, Draefis murmured, "Guess we're both survivors." He had no idea if the beast understood the words, but its unblinking gaze said enough. Somewhere in its feral instincts it saw a kindred spirit. Where all logic said they should kill each other, they instead stood side by side in the rain, two exiles bound by a world that wanted them dead. In the uncertain truce that followed, Draefis found himself shadowing the beast's movements as it guided him through the labyrinthine terrain. He quickly learned it was far more than a mere predator. Where he expected only brute strength, he discovered uncanny intelligence. In the hours and days that followed, he studied the creature, its habits, its mannerisms, and how it navigated the harsh ecosystem with lethal grace. When Surix prowled the undergrowth, Draefis followed. He took note of how the beast listened to changes in the wind, or how it recognized the subtle shift of leaves that hinted at a hidden predator. Every flick of Surix's spines or twitch of its tail was a language of warning. And in turn, Draefis offered something Surix had never known, an unpredictable spark of human ingenuity. He crafted rudimentary traps using broken branches and scavenged parts from the crash site. He tested local plants for toxins, carefully nibbling leaves to see if they were at least marginally edible. One evening, he found the entrance to a shallow cave, a space that provided shelter from the relentless rain and the region's nocturnal horrors. Surix followed him inside, its massive form nearly filling the cramped interior. Together, they huddled against the storm that battered the world outside. Thunder shook the mountains, lightning clawed at the sky. Yet beneath the low rocky ceiling, Draefis felt safer than he had in days. As the beast curled its bulky limbs beneath it, Draefis watched the slow rise and fall of its chest, a living arsenal of teeth and claws that could have ended him at any moment. He wondered why Surix spared him. Was it curiosity, respect, or some ancient survival instinct? Time blurred in that cave, the hours marked only by the rhythmic drumming of rain on stone. The raw wound on Draefis' shoulder festered, and he could feel infection setting in. Despite the risk, he gathered any local flora he recognized from standard field guides. With trembling hands, he chewed leaves into a poultice, pressing the bitter paste against the torn flesh. Surix observed this ritual with unblinking intensity, as though trying to memorize every motion. By the time the storm eased, Draefis was exhausted but alive. Surix nudged him gently, as if testing his vitality. If he were too weak to keep up, would the creature leave him behind or finish him off? Either outcome was possible. But in that moment, Draefis understood that they were bound together by the capricious mercy of Exor-9. As soon as the tempest relented, they set out once more, forging a path deeper into uncharted territory, two castaways united by a shared refusal to yield, each teaching the other something it did not yet know. Weeks passed in a blur of survival and tentative camaraderie. Each day, Draefis refined his understanding of Exor-9. He cataloged the different roars and howls echoing in the jungle at night, learning which signaled imminent danger and which were distant threats. Surix continued to prove itself an invaluable guide through the planet's labyrinth, its senses seemingly able to detect the faintest quiver in the ecosystem. Yet every step reminded Draefis that they were living on borrowed time. His chance came sooner than expected. One storm-lashed afternoon, Draefis heard the distant rumble of engines overhead. Risking the open terrain, he climbed the broken slope of a rocky outcrop until he spotted a sleek Imperial dropship descending toward the horizon. His pulse hammered at the sight. The Empire was back on Exor-9, likely to dispose of more undesirables or conduct a covert operation. Either way, it was an opportunity. Surix joined him at the vantage point, scanning the skies with predatory focus. As the dropship vanished into a roiling bank of clouds, Draefis' mind raced. He needed to know where it would land, who it carried, and whether he could commandeer it. With or without Surix, this might be his singular window to escape. The idea of leaving the beast behind wrenched something in his gut. It was more than just gratitude for not being devoured. Their bond transcended the logic of survival. It was an alliance between two outcasts. Night fell, ushered in by the usual torrent of rain, but Draefis and Surix pressed on. Thunder rumbled as they navigated treacherous slopes and boggy trails. Along the way, they encountered the remains of an older Imperial drone station, half consumed by the jungle's relentless growth. Draefis managed to salvage scraps of metal and a battered data core, hoping to glean some intel from the Empire's last known mission here. At dawn, they reached a cliffside overlooking a ravine where a new shuttle perched like a menacing hawk. Armed soldiers in black armor prodded a line of prisoners down a ramp, expressions of grim resignation etched on their faces. Seeing their plight stoked a fierce empathy in Draefis, recalling his own violent arrival. A small knot of Imperial officers watched over the operation. He recognized their uniforms, though the muddy distance blurred individual faces. Could Admiral Vance or Major Kiros be among them? A low growl from Surix reminded him they were not alone. He steadied his racing heart, observing from cover. The plan was forming in his mind. Free the prisoners, seize the vessel. At last, a glimmer of hope rose above his hatred. If he orchestrated a successful strike, he might find his way off this planet. And when he returned, he wouldn't come alone. He'd have a living nightmare at his side, a monster the Empire had never accounted for. Crouched amid thick ferns and dripping vines, Draefis assessed the Imperial landing zone. A perimeter of floodlights revealed a chain-link fence hastily erected around the shuttle. The black-armored soldiers numbered a dozen or more, each armed with rifles that glinted under the harsh glow. Near the center of the enclosure, a group of ragged prisoners knelt in the mud, guarded by an officer barking orders. He spotted an opportunity, a weak point in the fence where it met the uneven ground of the ravine's edge. If he could breach that point, he could slip in under cover of darkness. Surix watched intently, its sinewy muscles tense as though it too weighed the probabilities of success and failure. Any direct assault would be deadly, but stealth and surprise were their allies. Night descended in earnest, the moon smothered by storm clouds. Draefis crept along the ravine's rim, Surix close behind. The gentle scuff of claws on rock was the only sound that betrayed the beast's presence. In the flickering light of the perimeter, he could see the soldiers pacing, their visors reflecting an eerie glow. Any wrong move now would turn the mission into a bloodbath, but Draefis welcomed the risk. He felt a cold surge of adrenaline sharpen his senses. He would show them what an exile was truly capable of. A metallic pop resonated as he hurled his makeshift flash devices, each landing with a muted thud near the guards. For a tense second, nothing happened. Then brilliant bursts of light seared the air, turning the night white. Shouts erupted, rifles swung in confusion. A perfect opening. Surix launched itself like a phantom, claws raking across the nearest guard's armor before he could blink. Draefis vaulted over the bent fence, rolling into the enclosure with his blade at the ready. Two more guards spun toward him, blinking away the disorienting flare. He lunged low, slashing at their ankles. One crumpled with a scream. The other fired a burst of plasma that narrowly missed Draefis' shoulder. A savage roar announced Surix's presence behind them. The creature pinned a trooper beneath its claw, the man's scream cut short by lethal mandibles. Chaos tore through the camp as prisoners ducked for cover, terrified by the monstrous ally in their midst. Before the soldiers could regroup, Draefis commandeered a rifle from a fallen guard and began firing short, controlled bursts. One by one, black-armored figures collapsed. In less than a minute, the skirmish ended. Smoke and the tang of burnt ozone hung in the damp air. Breath ragged, Draefis surveyed the carnage. The prisoners stared at him, faces pale, unsure whether to consider him savior or demon. Surix loomed beside him, tail lashing slowly. Together they had reduced an Imperial strongpoint to ruins. Draefis offered a hand to the nearest prisoner, a wiry man with hollow cheeks and wide eyes. "We're getting off this rock," he said, voice tinged with both relief and grim resolve. "And we're doing it together." The aftermath of the raid revealed more than Draefis had anticipated. As the prisoners scrambled for weapons or gathered in small, uncertain groups, one figure stepped forward. Lieutenant Aliana Swift, a former colleague Draefis recognized instantly. She was gaunt, her face bruised, but her eyes lit up with a spark of defiance. Once a dedicated officer in the Empire's Special Recon Division, she had clearly fallen afoul of the same system that had exiled him. "Commander Thorn," she said, voice trembling with relief and lingering shock. "They told us you were dead." "I imagine they did," Draefis replied, glancing at Surix, who was busy prowling around the perimeter as though ensuring no survivors remained. The other prisoners watched the beast with a mix of terror and awe. Draefis turned back to Aliana. "What happened?" She explained in rapid whispers how she'd uncovered evidence that Major Torin Kiros and Admiral Tizora Vance had forged the orders leading to Draefis' trial. They planned to scapegoat him for a civilian massacre he refused to carry out. In retaliation, Aliana had tried to blow the whistle but was silenced, arrested on charges of conspiracy. She gestured to a small data chip concealed in her boot lining. "I managed to keep it hidden. It contains transmissions and logs that prove your innocence. And it shows Vance's involvement in mass corruption, including the deployment of biological weapons on unsuspecting colonies." The battered prisoners gathered around, some still trembling from the assault, others wearing hard expressions of men and women who had tasted too much injustice. Draefis offered them a chance at freedom. "We've got a shuttle," he said, nodding toward the captured craft. "Surix and I can't fly it alone. If you help me, we all get off this planet alive." A murmur ran through the crowd. Many recognized his name from the rumors swirling among the ranks. Commander Thorn, the man who defied an unlawful order, the one who supposedly betrayed the Empire. Yet here he stood, defying death itself alongside a monstrous companion that should have been an unstoppable killing machine. His presence alone challenged the official narrative that had condemned them. Cautious optimism spread among them. A lanky man with a shaved head volunteered his skill as a pilot. Others inspected the fallen soldier's gear, salvaging rifles and grenades. Aliana powered up the shuttle's console, running a diagnostic on its engines. Meanwhile, Surix paced the perimeter, occasionally pausing to watch them with an inscrutable gaze. As they worked, Draefis felt an undercurrent of urgency. The Empire would inevitably notice their missing drop team. Sooner or later, more ships would come, possibly an entire fleet if Admiral Vance sensed her plans were threatened. Once they left XOR-9, there would be no going back. He caught Aliana's eye, then the data chip in her hand. "We take this to the right people," he said quietly, "and we bring the whole corrupt edifice crashing down." Preparations unfolded at a breakneck pace. The battered prisoners, now turned allies, swarmed over the drop shuttle, patching hull breaches and jury-rigging makeshift defenses. The pilot, a steady-handed mechanic named Ryan, cursed under his breath at the condition of the engines. Still, he promised he could get them off this accursed world. Draefis moved among them, offering both reassurance and a clear directive. They would leave nobody behind. Surix's presence stirred conflicting emotions. Some viewed the beast as an omen of hope, proof that survival was possible against all odds. Others saw it as a hair's breadth away from turning on them. Draefis understood their fear. When the Empire had exiled him, he never imagined forging a bond with one of XOR-9's apex predators. Yet here they were, side by side, an unlikely partnership built on mutual respect rather than coercion. The time to launch arrived sooner than they would have liked. Aliana finished decrypting a portion of the data chip, verifying crucial evidence that would implicate Admiral Vance and Major Kiros in war crimes. With the console humming and the engines sputtering to life, Draefis ushered the last of the prisoners on board. Surix watched from a short distance, its gaze flicking between the open shuttle ramp and the storm-darkened sky. Draefis felt a pang of uncertainty. Would the creature even fit inside? And if so, how would it react to the enclosed space? As if sensing his dilemma, Surix let out a low rumble and trotted forward. The shuttle's cargo hold was cramped, but the beast hunched down, folding its spines close to its body. A wave of relieved laughter spread among the prisoners. Some parted like a frightened tide as Surix made its way inside, but no one dared oppose it. Rain fired the thrusters, and the shuttle trembled. Rain hissed off the hull, and the engines roared in protest. Slowly, the craft lifted off the muddy clearing, rising above the twisted canopy. For a fleeting moment, Draefis glimpsed the battered remains of what had once been his prison. The swirl of storm clouds enveloped them, lightning crackling in brilliant arcs. Over the comm system, alarms beeped, signaling the precarious atmospheric conditions. XOR-9 seemed determined to keep its hold on them until the very end. Then, with a final shudder, they broke free, soaring into the upper atmosphere. Relief mixed with adrenaline in Draefis's veins. They had escaped the planet that was supposed to be his grave. Yet he sensed their real battle had only begun. The Empire wouldn't sit idle after losing a dropship and an entire squad to a band of exiles being led by a disgraced commander and his monstrous ally. Sure enough, as they breached orbit, sensors flared to life. An Imperial frigate loomed above XOR-9's horizon like a metal predator. Warnings lit the shuttle's cockpit. The frigate was scanning them, attempting to lock weapons. Draefis clenched his jaw. They had come too far to be shot down now. "Evasive maneuvers," he ordered, glancing at Aliana. "If we're caught, we'll never get the truth out." Ryan's hands danced over the controls. The shuttle jerked to one side as a bright lance of energy lanced past them. The frigate was already firing. Surix let out a deafening snarl at the sudden jolt, claws scraping the deck. The exiles braced for impact, fear shining in their eyes. One more shot could end them all, scattering their hopes into the cold vacuum of space. Time stretched to a knife's edge as the Imperial frigate unleashed another barrage of glowing projectiles. Ryan twisted the shuttle through a stomach-churning evasive pattern, engines shrieking in protest. Aliana worked frantically at the controls, searching for any holes in the frigate's targeting systems. Sparks flew as near misses clipped the shuttle's wings, but somehow they remained in one piece. The Exlos huddled in terror, each aware that one direct hit would spell annihilation. "Send out a broadwave signal," Draefis commanded, bracing against the cockpit's frame. "They need to know who we are." A static-laced broadcast emanated from the shuttle's comm array. He identified himself as Commander Draefis Thorn, declared his survival, and announced that proof of high-level corruption was on board. His words resonated across all available channels, leaving no room for the Empire to hide. If the frigate destroyed them now, it would only fuel suspicions that Draefis' revelations were the truth. For a tense heartbeat, the frigate ceased its onslaught, perhaps uncertain whether to risk turning a public scandal into a confirmed conspiracy. Taking advantage of the brief lull, Ryan gunned the engines and pushed the shuttle to its limits, slipping into the fringes of deep space. A moment later, the frigate resumed its pursuit, but the Exiles had gained enough distance to initiate a micro-jump. The shuttle vanished in a flash of blue-white light, leaving XOR-9 and the Imperial warship behind, at least for now. In the dimly lit cabin, the survivors erupted into a chorus of relieved cries and exhausted laughter. Draefis sank against the bulkhead, adrenaline still thrumming in his bloodstream. Surix, panting and clearly agitated, nudged his side. He placed a calming hand on the creature's armored hide, grateful beyond words. They had done the impossible. Escaped the unescapable planet with both proof of the Empire's betrayal and a monstrous ally no one could have predicted. Once the shuttle stabilized, Aliana emerged from the cockpit, the data chip clutched protectively in her hand. "We have a rendezvous with a sympathetic outpost," she said. "If we can upload this information to the wider networks, Admiral Vance and Major Kairos will have nowhere to hide." Draefis nodded. He gazed around at the ragtag group, former prisoners, each with a score to settle. "We're not just survivors anymore," he said quietly. "We're witnesses to what the Empire truly is, and we have the weapon to expose them." Surix let out a rumble, its red eyes glinting, as though understanding the significance of his words. In some ways, the beast symbolized everything the Empire feared: the unknown, the uncontrollable, the power that thrived outside their rigid dominion. Together, Draefis and Surix stood as living proof that the Empire's illusions of invincibility could be shattered. The shuttle continued its silent voyage through the stars, carrying with it a spark that could ignite a revolution. As Draefis closed his eyes, he let himself dream of the day he would confront Admiral Vance face to face, the day he would broadcast the truth to the galaxy. They had exiled him to die on a world of nightmares, but he had returned with a nightmare of his own, a creature so fearsome that even the Empire's might would tremble before it. And their story was only beginning. Thank you for journeying with us through this intense adventure on XOR-9 and beyond. Draefis' unwavering determination, combined with Surix's formidable power, proves that even in the most desperate circumstances, courage can rise against overwhelming odds. If you can't get enough of this story's suspenseful twist, stay tuned to our channel. We have plenty of new stories in the works that promise heart-pounding action, unforgettable heroes, and sinister villains. Don't forget to leave your thoughts in the comments and tell us your favorite moment from Draefis' fight for survival. Hearing from our audience fuels our passion for sharing more riveting tales. Until next time, subscribe for updates, turn on notifications, and be ready for the next exciting saga that awaits.